G'day guys, have you ever stopped and considered what the true cost is when it comes to cohabitation and your reptiles? Well guys, stick around. In this video we're going to discuss this very topic. G'day guys and welcome back to Cookies Critters. So if you are new to this channel, please do me a favour, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on those post notifications. As I discussed in the intro, today we are discussing cohabitation and reptiles. So guys, I got this phone call over the weekend, right? And it was from a reptile keeper who was a little bit distressed, a little bit upset. He's gone to check in on his animals, do his morning feeding routine, and he found one of his female bearded dragons with what he suspected was a broken lower jaw. Now, I've gone to ask more questions to find out what the situation is, what the setup is, all that kind of stuff. Even just to double check what kind of bearded dragon it actually was. And anyway, I was a little bit taken back by the fact that he didn't even know what subspecies of bearded dragon it was. So I get a more detailed description of the animal, and it ends up that this is a pygmy bearded dragon. So really small, easy to handle, easy to house. So I'm inclined to ask more questions, right? And I do. And he divulges to me that the female's been housed with another male, and in fact that these guys have been together for about 4 or 5 years and were in fact siblings. Now, his impression was that the male has attacked the female, but he can't understand why, because 4 or 5 years, nothing's gone wrong. If you house animals together, there is always going to be an inherent risk that your animals will attack. Eventually something's going to happen, whether it's a hormone thing, whether it's a food response, whether it's just age, pain, whatever. Like something happens and an animal can snap and that's it. All of a sudden you've got an animal with a missing limb, missing part of its tail, or in this situation had its jaw hanging off. Now, I hear the success stories all the time about cohabitation. And the thing is, I'm not here to argue that because people have had successes in the past. I'm here to highlight the true risk and the nature of cohabitation. Is it worth it? Now, yes, you might be saving space by having 2 or 3 dragons in the same enclosure, but is the price of one of them paying their life, is that not too high for you? For me, that is. I don't do it, and I would never recommend anyone to cohabitate their animals.
Okay guys, so I thought I'd better quickly jump in here and add a bit of a caveat, a bit of a disclaimer here. So there are a few exceptions to this do not cohabitate your reptiles. Some species are communal. In particular, there are some geckos and skinks and even some of the smaller dragons that do live in communal colonies. Now guys, the takeaway from this is please do know your animals, do know what requirements they do have, and bear in mind that even the communal reptiles can still have issues when it comes to territorial aggression, feeding, accidental biting, issues while breeding. So guys, all the best and let's keep cracking.
Another question I get all the time is, I'm looking for a boyfriend or a girlfriend for my little dragon or for my snake or for my gecko. Well, guess what guys? These animals are solitary animals. They do not need companionship. They don't need the human emotions and the desires and the stuff that we have as humans, right? That's called anthropomorphism. So that's how we project our human emotions onto our animals. Now, what they do need is what's widely accepted as the 5 animal freedoms. So I'm going to drop them in the comments down below, and I'm just going to quickly glaze over it because later on in this series I will do a more detailed video. So guys, the 5 animal freedoms are freedom from thirst and hunger, freedom from injury, illnesses and diseases, freedom from fear and distress, freedom from discomfort and the environment, and the last one is the freedom to display natural behaviours. So guys, when you break it down, if we cohabitate our animals together, we are breaking all 5 policies when it comes to the 5 freedoms. Now, looking at, freedom from hunger and thirst, if you've got 2 animals in the same enclosure, there's going to be competition when it comes to food, and ultimately one's going to miss out. Moving on to the injuries and the illnesses and stuff like that, if the animals are combating, then one's going to have an injury, and essentially this will need to be treated and managed. Fear and distress. Okay, if your animals aren't combating and they aren't being aggressive and attacking each other, well, there's always the passive-aggressive nature of having a dominant and a submissive. And for an example, right? So, Fergie's in the enclosure by herself. That's fine. That's her little basking spot. Now, if there was a male in there, she would lose her basking spot and she'd end up on the sand substrate. And what that means is that she's further away from the UVB, further away from the basking spot, and further away from her little comfortable hammock. Now, the fear and distress part also then leads into an animal showing sort of stressful behaviours, whether that's window surfing or trying to burrow and bury themselves and not eat and all those kind of things. There's a long flow-on effect with the mental health side of animal keeping. Now, the last one is the freedom to show normal behaviours, right? Now, it's not normal for bearded dragons to cohabitate side by side, nice and cozy, cuddled up. They don't do that. If you've got animals cuddling up, pancaking, stacking on top of each other, then the one on top is being dominant and the one below is being submissive. And the one on top is actually crowding and taking away the chance for the other one to have a normal behaviour, which is to bask. So other examples of this are, I just had a young guy message me recently, and he just purchased what seems to be a 1-year-old bearded dragon, and it looked very little and very lean for its age. Now, as he explains the situation further on, I think there was like 4 or 5 animals of the same size. So we're talking animals that are maybe about 30-ish centimeters in size in the one enclosure, and probably something about this size, like a 3 foot, 5 animals in the one enclosure. It's ridiculous. Now, animals do grow and mature at different rates. I understand that. But when you've got 5 animals in the one enclosure, then there's going to be a dominant and a submissive, and this guy was potentially just the runt and the submissive one, and he wasn't getting the food, he wasn't getting the UV, he wasn't getting the heat. And now, since this guy has bought the dragon, the animal is starting to thrive, and that's what we aim for when we keep reptiles or any animals, is for them to thrive, to have a good quality of life, not just surviving. We want our animals to thrive. Now, doing all the right things, this animal is now thriving. I'm a breeder. I have multiple bearded dragons in the one room, and they all have their own enclosure. And even with all my geckos and all my snakes, they all have their own enclosures, their own tubs, everything. I introduce the male into the female's enclosure to reduce the need for any undue stress. Now, I've had a colleague of mine. He told me a story about a knobtail gecko, actually. Now, if you're not familiar with these guys, they are very small, but they do have a pretty big attitude to them. Now, anyway, he'd had all his females and his males and all that separate throughout the year, growing them out. And come breeding season, he introduced the male into the female's enclosure and came back a couple hours later, and he couldn't find the male. So the assumption had to be made that she had actually eaten the male. A couple of hours down the track, she ended up regurgitating him, and unfortunately he did not survive. The idea of having males in with a female for breeding, I personally keep the exposure and the encounter to as brief of a period as possible. There's no need to create unnecessary stress. So, more dragons, more geckos equals more enclosures. Simple as that. Like, that is the takeaway here. Don't mix your species. Don't have a bluey in with a beardy. Don't have a frilly in with a gecko. Like, stuff doesn't make sense. Like, I had one person reach out to me and say, well, I've got 3 dragons in the one enclosure, and it's a big enclosure, and I've got 5 food bowls and multiple basking spots and multiple UV lights and water bowls and hides and climbs and etc, etc. But guess what? It's excessive and it's completely unnecessary. Like, it's a form of mitigation for a situation that doesn't even need to exist in the first place. So guys, simple. Do not cohabitate your dragons. It'll end up in tears eventually. So guys, I hope you did enjoy today's video. If you do have varying opinions to what I have portrayed in today's video, I do encourage you to drop them down in the comments below. Please do be respectful though. These are my thoughts and opinions. And yeah, for everyone else, please do us a favor, hit that like button. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. And as always guys, if you've got them, keep your beard treated and your beard is heated.